review and their report, and I want to compliment her once again and the team that she leads for their outstanding service to the DeKalb County School District. They have done yeoman's work over the last 2 years and have elevated us from the cusp of losing accreditation to the very threshold of unconditional accreditation. I want to recognize her and the team. If you're here, stand up and let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Come on. There you go. Ms. Deborah, all the way in the back. Thank you, Mr. Thurman. Members of the board, under the direction of the Board of Education and Superintendent Michael Thurman, the district began the journey in 2013 to earn back full accreditation after being placed on accredited probation by Advanced Ed in December of 2012. The district was placed under monitoring review by Advanced Ed and assigned 11 required actions. We were required to provide progress reports and receive monitoring visits every 6 months to show documented work completed and evidence of actions taken to address the 11 required actions. In July of 2013, our monitoring report following our visit, Advanced Ed noted recognizable progress. In January of 2014, the monitoring report after our visit, Advanced Ed marked the district as completion of 8 out of 11 required actions and moved the district from accredited probation to accredited warned. We continued our monitoring visits, and in July of 2014, our monitoring report, Advanced Ed noted material progress. And then on February 13th, 2015, after completing our December 2014 visit, Advanced Ed upgraded the district to accredited advisement, 1 notch from unconditional accreditation. Advanced Ed noted significant progress, but they did state the district is at a crossroad. Members of the board, along this journey, we have had as many as 14 required actions to complete. But today, we are down to 3 required actions. Again, 1 step from unconditional accreditation. So what are our next steps? Well, I'm glad you asked. In the words of Superintendent Thurman, we have the opportunity to become normal. We have the opportunity in the very near future, if we really wanted, to join our fellow metro districts, Gwinnett, Cobb, Fulton, and Atlanta, and become fully accredited by Advanced Ed SACS. We also have the opportunity to become accredited by the Georgia Accrediting Commission. So in closure of this report, members of the board, we need your continued leadership, your guidance, and your support to finish this leg of the race and do what is required and remain committed to obtain unconditional accreditation. So over the next couple of months, we will be coming back and we will be asking for your support and your guidance and policy making decision, as well as support and approval of things that are necessary for us to meet those 3 required actions. And if we do that work and put in the time as we've done the last 2 years, and we could not have done it without your leadership and the leadership of Superintendent Thurman, we will, for the boys and girls and the parents and citizens of this county, become fully accredited. Again, we are 1 notch from unconditional accreditation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramona. Is there any discussion or comments from the board? On behalf of the board, I personally will, I'm sorry. Mr. Orson? Go ahead.
Ramona, I want to thank you for the hard work you've done. I know you have been sort of on the front lines of this battle for a long time, and I think there's been remarkable progress. And tonight, I don't want to go into the details of the report, but I do have to express that I am, while appreciative of the improvement of our status, concerned about the statements made by SACS in its report. And I think it's going to require us to have some long and hard discussions about what those next steps are. The conditions that they have outlined are not reflected in the policies of any other school district in the metro area that I can see. I appreciate that they have demanded that we make these changes, but ultimately they are a policy decision of this board, and I think we have to consider closely about what works best for ensuring that this district moves forward, which I think is not a measure, quite frankly, of our accreditation status, but of the things that really matter, which is whether our children are getting a quality education, whether our graduation rate is rising, whether we are demonstrating that we are effective in the classroom. And so I say this without, again, going into the details, because I think we need to have a robust discussion about the demands that they've made and whether we think they're reasonable in light of how not only our school district but other school districts operate, and what the consequences are in terms of the decisions we make, because again, I think the ultimate responsibility we have is to the children in our classrooms and to the teachers who are serving those children. But with all that said, I do want to thank you and the group that's worked with you for the hard work, but I think this is going to have to be a really meaningful discussion. I don't take lightly what I've just said, but I also don't take comfortably the kinds of demands, quite frankly, that were outlined in that report by SACS.
Thank you. Mr. Thurman, you have a comment?
First, once again, thank you, Ms. Tyson, your team, for your outstanding service. All due respect to Mr. Orson, what was asked I don't see as a demand. The one most critical one goes to and addresses what has been an historical problem in DeKalb County, which is school board members undermining and, for lack of a better term, seeking to circumvent the roles and responsibilities of superintendents. And it goes back beyond this board. And just based on 2 years of having been in DeKalb and listening and learning and researching, I submit to you that the seeds of the crisis that nearly resulted in the complete collapse of this district originated with board members who did not respect the lines of authority and sought to, in a very unethical way, to undermine past superintendents. It's not so much a problem I have, but I think as we begin this process of hiring a new superintendent, I think it's critical that this board clearly and unequivocally state that they will respect the superintendent who sits in this seat, whoever he or she may be, and that he or she will be given the opportunity to continue the success. I understand personal beliefs, and I've done some preliminary analysis of districts in the metro area and across the state, and what is being requested by SACS is not atypical, to be quite frank. And I will be happy to provide you and the board with the research on best practices so that this board can continue the progress we're making, and we will not return. We will not return. I'll do everything in my power to ensure that we do not return, and it will be my recommendation to the board, and of course the board can make their choice, that this policy being proposed or suggested by SACS be adopted by this board.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Mr. McMahon, did you have a comment? Mr. Orson?
And Mr. Thurman, I appreciate your comments. I have actually, and I did at the request of the chair some time ago, look at the policies in every neighboring district when this language was first proposed by SACS. And it is not language that appears in those policies in the Metro District, including the one district that was actually lost its accreditation. I prefer to be forward-looking, and I think whatever bad behaviors existed, and I think there's a more substantial debate about, and I don't, this is a weird position to be, I don't mean to necessarily be defending the actions of the previous board, but I think where we got to was a far more complex issue than even the actions of just the board alone. And that's why I think we need to have a robust debate about not only what the proper balance is, and I think our policy strikes a proper balance, but, the respectful position that a board has vis-a-vis what it's responsible for as a governing body. And quite frankly, I read it as a demand because it has set as a condition for full accreditation, no matter whatever else we do, that we agree to that change. And quite frankly, this agency, I believe has overreached and has overreached before in other contexts. They did it at the University of Virginia and found themselves in similar situations by making a demand of the board there that was found to be an overreach. But I think more substantively, the discussion has to be about, tonight is not the night, what the proper and appropriate balance is for having an effective board and effective governance. And I think there is a philosophical underpinning there that needs to be debated and needs to look at practices in other districts and in other industries in terms of figuring out how do we effectively govern the system. Everything that has been suggested has been, whether we agree or not, about what previous boards have done. And I find that there's a certain level of overreach that doesn't judge us based on what the results we get as a district. And I think ultimately that has to be the ultimate measure of our success or failure, is what we do for the children here. And some of this is nuanced and some of this is meaningless, but I think it is also meaningful in terms of a board being effective. And I think at some point we need to convene in a session that's appropriate with the time and the information and the data and the research to be able to make an effective decision. But I think ultimately it has to be a decision made by us and not dictated by an external agency.
Well, as I said, I will make a recommendation, Mr. Chair, to the board, and of course the board can vote as each board member sees fit. And I will also, at the appropriate time, share with the board emails and other communications that are currently being made. So it's not just a problem of the past that Mr. Orson may have copies of, but I'll share that with the board at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Orson, and thank you, Mr. Superintendent. As an individual, I'm sorry, Ms. Turner, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'd just like to say I've listened to the discussion and appreciate all the comments. But I think that on one hand, we want what SACS or Advanced Ed brings to the table, and then we want to try to dictate what portion of it we receive. I believe it's an all or nothing. I believe that what has happened, and we have to be careful to celebrate the victories of this district. It has brought credibility back to us. It has brought some credibility to our students and to our parents and to our district. And I want to stay in the posture of celebrating that without majoring on minor things. We do know that we have some history that has not been profitable to us and has caused us to get in this situation. But I want to thank the work of Mrs. Tyson and her team. I want to thank the concerted efforts of the superintendent's office. And I do believe that we have to draw some lines and boundaries, because the bigger picture is what is best for our children. The bigger picture. We all have opinions, but the bigger picture is we are here for the good of our children and giving them a quality educational experience that will serve them well throughout life, and I commend you for your efforts, and I want to move and continue in that trajectory. Thank you.
Mr. McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. And I started the evening with inspiration, talking about how proud I was of our board, and I am. And I know deep in our heart, we all want what's best. And I'm not going to speak for anybody else but myself. And I know that it is proper procedure to go through the superintendent when asking for information from the staff and from this district. And I know everybody else here on the board does. We act the right way. We'll get our policies. We hadn't done a policy review in a while, a comprehensive review, and that's something that we need to do. We will work with our administration through the superintendent, and we'll figure it out. And it all starts with a healthy conversation. And I appreciate everybody here, including the superintendent and his wonderful staff and the board, our fellow board members. So thank you for your time, and let's get to closing comments.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. I have listened to the conversation tonight relative to advanced ed, and personally I want to thank the superintendent and his staff again for a job well done. I personally would like to thank Ms. Ramona Tyson for going beyond the call of duty, for she has scheduled, she has programmed, she has monitored all of the things to ensure the success of this particular effort. That's why we have a board. We have individual board members who believe in different ideologies. We have individuals who have their focus on whatever they desire this school system to be or to become. Personally, I'm for 100,000 students, and whatever is necessary to achieve the climate in this school district so that those 100,000 students will be successful, that's what I'm for. And it will not be because a board policy says that I cannot go to a school without notifying the superintendent. That's personal. Whether I have to go through the superintendent, whether other school systems believe or not believe, other school systems are not on probation and have not been on probation and not in the condition that we have been, and not have been having board members replaced. Now, to contest one thing, a lot of things I may not like, but if it would be for 100,000 students, you bet on it, I'm for that. Mr. Jester.
If I can take us back to the SACS discussion for a second.
Okay.
I've noticed over the last couple of years that the SACS requirements tend to be a moving target, as it were, and I would hate to implement requirements just for the sake of implementing them. It wasn't long ago, maybe a couple years ago, that an internal auditor was one of the requirements. So if we're just going to be implementing the requirements, maybe we should look back at the history and see what's best for DeKalb schools, students and teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jester. Any more comments? Hearing none,